Hello, and welcome to Greet the Week. This is Mona Duncan, and Jan Moray is joining us today, as always, the two of us together. And we have some other dear friends that are joining, and we welcome you. And those of you that will be watching this at a later date, thank you for tuning in. And we always welcome your input. So just send us a note and tell us some, insights that you received or gained, or some that you would like to have discussed, or maybe some rebuttals. We're open to that. So Jan, today I was really intrigued by the topic that you chose for today, and then how you explained it. The fact that we are looking at valuing being honest, and that sometimes, we want to give punishment rather than acknowledging the fact that someone is being honest.
Right.
We kind of want to diss them rather than congratulating them and approving that. So give us some in-depth. Where are you coming from?
Well, I've been thinking about this for quite a while. We've talked about white lies and lying and things like that here, and I've kind of been paying attention to people in my everyday life. We tend to cover the truth because we're afraid of what the other person's reaction might be, because it's negative. And so we tend to try to stretch the truth a little bit or sugarcoat it so that it doesn't sound so harsh, because we really don't appreciate honesty as much as we should. We keep looking at what happened instead of trying to understand it from the other person's point of view. And I think one of the examples I gave is like punishing a child for breaking a vase, and then you wonder why when you ask, who did this? I didn't, she did it, and you're pointing fingers, is because nobody wants to own up to it because they know they're going to get punished. When the real message we want to teach is we want our children to be honest. We want people to tell us the truth, even when it's not something that we want to hear. It's still important for us to hear the truth, and because then you don't really know which direction to go. If somebody's, like, for example, if somebody's always telling you, great job, you did, your great speech, I really enjoyed what you did, you don't really learn from that. But if somebody says, oh, you could have done things a little bit differently for your message and stuff, is that's helpful to you, even though you may not want to hear that. It's better for you to know what's really going on, and to encourage people to be honest with you instead of just trying to boost up your ego, because eventually somebody's going to cut you down and you're like, well, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't anyone mention this before? I just thought that was something we could talk about today, is how can we be an example of showing that we really value honesty.
Right. So it is like you broke the vase, but instead of pointing the finger at someone else, or I couldn't help it, I didn't do it, blaming the fact that the cord was in the way, or whatever, it's taking responsibility for, and then valuing that. Thank you very much for, I know in one of the chicken soup books, there was this guy that I don't remember his name right now, but he went on to become a really renowned scientist and researcher. And he credits it with his mom, and how she encouraged him when things went wrong. And he told this one incident in particular, that he was carrying in a gallon jug of milk, and he dropped it. And it was plastic, but it broke, and milk went everywhere. And the mother turned around and she looked at him, and knowing that he was carrying something he wasn't capable of carrying or putting it up on the counter. And she says, "Oh my, what a wonderful mess you have made." And the mess was already there. So she says, we need to clean this up. It wasn't any blaming or fussing at. We need to clean this up. And because the child didn't know how to do that, sometimes we don't know how to be responsible. That may be why we try those little cover-ups. But anyway, she said, well, the mess is already made. And they got down on their knees and they made art in the milk. They put their hand down and pull it up and watch it come back together, And then together they cleaned it all up. And then after that, put the rest of the groceries up, fixed everything. They went outside, and she got another jug of milk and milk jug and filled it with water and helped the child learn how to, maybe put it under the arm and brace it or
right.
to prevent that in the future.
Yeah.
That it goes back to what you said. If you just let me know something, maybe there can be a lesson there that we can learn.
Right. That reminds me about spilling the milk. My kids, whenever they would spill things, I would say, okay, let's all mop it up. Let's work together and clean it up. And one time I was on the phone with my mom and the kids were arguing and mother said, what's all that commotion? I said, well, one of the kids dropped something and now they're fighting over who gets to clean it up.
Oh, that's one of those good things.
That's right. And so you just have to laugh when something like that happens. It's like, okay, I'm teaching them responsibility, that they're taking responsibility for what they did, but they enjoyed mopping things up so much that they were fighting about it.
Right. And
if you can turn things around so that there is something positive about it, then it's enjoyable.
Right. And it's kind of that counterintuitive. If we don't value being honest, we have a tendency to stretch the truth.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And it's counterintuitive. And so how do you value being honest? Well, it's kind of like silence. Silence is counterintuitive because we really have two ears to listen more than we have the one mouth to talk.
Right.
But it's counterintuitive to be silent. And so often, well, what does it go to? One of Jerry's frequent questions is, what does things mean? What does it mean to value something?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of words that we could, put onto that, but I just went to the Merriam-Webster to get their top ones. There would be one thing for value was worth, and then there was a whole lot of little subcategories under that as to what the main topic was. And so it's worth, it's importance, it's denomination. What we value, is it $10 or $20? Is it $100? It has that denomination to it. So there's so many ways that we can look at what value means. It means to appreciate. I say quite frequently, anything that appreciates goes up in value.
Right.
And so as we appreciate the honesty, even though it may be telling us something we don't want to hear, there can be something, and then what does it mean to be honest? To be truthful?
From your perception of the way it is.
Yeah. To be truthful, to be trustworthy. And if we're not truthful, we have a tendency to not be trustworthy. And
right.
it's
there's somebody catches you saying a lie, they don't trust you very much.
Right. And there's just this aura that we send out. And I mean, people read us, we read people. And those things, they begin to follow us. So it's to value that, put a worth on it, give an importance to it, appreciate being honest.
And Charlotte has made a couple of good points in her chat here. We have to be mindful how we present ourselves when we are honest. Because yes, you can be brutally honest and say something that is going to be hurtful to somebody else. And so you have to be aware of how you're saying it and notice how the person's responding. If the person looks like they're upset by your honesty, acknowledge that and talk about it and try to find another way to say it so that they don't feel like they're being cornered or whatever. Right. And her other comment here is, do you think people really want to hear the truth? And that's true. and you'll learn that right away. You'll learn that if you start telling people what you really feel and they don't appreciate it, and no matter how much you try to let them know that I'm really just trying to help you out, then maybe that person isn't willing to hear the truth, or is not at a place that they can hear the truth. But on the other hand, don't ever ask a question if you can't take an honest answer, because sometimes you'll ask people, how do I look, or how's my talk, hoping to get reinforcement that it was good. But if it wasn't, if you're going to ask that kind of question, you have to be prepared for how they, what they tell you.
Right, right. And then even ask, may I be honest?
Right.
And if they give you permission to be honest, but then again, even with that, it doesn't mean just dumping the whole load. It means being kind, because that value goes back to the fact of appreciating. It's appreciating the person. It's appreciating. But we can't be so constrained with what someone else is going to think.
Mm-hmm.
We
Right.
can't be so, it goes back to, and realizing the fact that no matter what, it's just someone giving information, whether it's us giving information or them giving information or whatever. And of course, tone of voice, there's just so many facial expressions, hand gestures, tone of voice,
Right.
all of those things feed into whatever the message is or the information that's being given. And, in the Oriental way of health and all that, they have chakras, and it's the 8 different energy sections in the body that holds our energy. And if it gets clogged, then it's difficult for things to pass through. And in the gut, you ever talk about, well, I just had this gut feeling, I got to go with my gut. Well, that's part of the Oriental chakra system. The stomach area, the digestive, the elimination system is the gut area, and that also is the seat or the orientation of our esteem.
Oh yeah, okay.
Toward self and toward others. And whenever we don't value honesty, or we're not honest, or we don't, and it's always with a front of being kind, of being polite. Even if it is honest, you can be polite with it, whether it's received, Right. But if we are not honest with what's going on in our gut and listen to it and heed it, we get all cramped up. We don't digest well, we don't eliminate well, and it just begins to make that clog there that affects everything in our body.
Yes, it does. Yes, it can. It can.
And so I was thinking about this, and I remembered a book that something about integrity, which anyway, and it was talking about how do we arrive at truth, or how do we arrive at honesty. And it went back to the German philosopher Hegel, Hegel, and how he was talking about to continually have with yourself a continuing dialectic. And that dialectic means to discuss, to have a discussion with yourself, you and you, your higher self, lower self, have this discussion with yourself, the things that you really know and the things you think you know, with this discussion, or some kind of a systematic way of weighing and measuring and facts and assumptions, what I think, what I know, what I think I know. Weighing those things back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and seeing how all of those different components of that fit into the whole of the situation, and whether or not it is, back to Dr. Glasser's terminology, effective or ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
And is it effective for me? Is it effective for them? Is it effective for the good of the whole? Because we're all connected and we all influence each other one way or another.
Yeah.
And so just not getting ourselves all clogged up and damming up the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in something. It just kind of stops you in your tracks, and you just can't get past it. Is that kind of what you're talking about? When not really. So like when you're hearing something and you're not hearing the things that you want to hear, then you kind of get stuck in all that,
Right.
that's going on, and trying to process it and not really knowing what to do with it.
Or trying to process it, or sometimes if we hear it and it's not something we want to hear, we just automatically discount it.
Uh-huh.
Either discounting it verbally or discounting it mentally, but just discounting it.
Yeah.
And it's at least being open to receiving it, being open to think about it, being open to ponder it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that word, ponder.
Ponder, yeah.
Or to mull it over.
So what's worse? Is it worse to lie about something? You being the receiver, to have somebody lie to you about something, or to have them tell you the truth, but it be uncomfortable to hear.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like we're choosing that. We'd rather have people lie to us. If we want them to give us compliments or validate what we said, but we're just kind of living in our own little world, believing what we want to believe because nobody's questioning what we're doing and allowing us to continue doing what we're doing. Whereas somebody comes to us and is being honest and say, that just doesn't sit well with me.
Right.
I just don't think that's quite right.
Well, I personally, which, it's really the only one I can speak for, I want honesty.
Yeah.
And I want to be honest.
Yeah.
And I continually, two incidents. I had a friend tell me one time that my whole personality was marked by anger.
Oh.
And I mean, that stung.
I would imagine.
I mean, I knew I had the temper, and I knew I could, be harsh and chew people out and all that kind of stuff. But my whole personality. And anyway, I mean, I had to do a lot of thinking about that, and a lot of choosing to forgive her and choosing to forgive me and choosing to, and but I want to hear that. I do. Because we can become so myopic.
Right. I mean, it's really good to hear things from another person's point of view. We can choose not to heed it and say, okay, that's your opinion, that's what you're seeing, and I really disagree with it. I've done a lot of soul searching, and I really don't agree with that. And it takes a strong person to be able to do that. But at least it gets you to start looking at things that you may not have paid attention to in the past, and that's great for personal growth to look into those areas that you hadn't considered. And it's nice to have somebody bring that stuff to your attention so you understand, okay, they're seeing it that I'm coming across this way. Maybe I can change the way my delivery and change the way I say things.
And then be open to that so you can at least watch for it.
Right. Because you're never going to know it. You're never going to notice it yourself unless somebody brings it to your attention.
Mm-hmm. There was a cartoon in the paper not too long ago about this girl with two friends were talking back and forth, and one was telling the other one that she was too emotional, too excitable, and all this, and she got real excited, and she said, "Yeah, and whenever you get that way, your voice gets so high, and you just talk 90 to nothing." And the other girl, well, I mean, she was in the cartoon. Of course, it was showing you that the verbiage was getting quite shrill, and she said, "Oh, I do not." And all of a sudden, she had this blank look on her. She said, "Oh, you mean like that?" Ouch. But and then being honest with others. I want to be honest, but I am learning more and more to ask permission to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it's something that I think just may.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about the price that anybody pays for dishonesty? What price do we pay for lying or dishonesty or being maybe overly tactful, perhaps? Or something? What's the price for dishonesty?
Well, you know, there is a payday for everything, only it may not come every Friday. And whether that's a payday of getting a reward for being honest and just and, you know, and getting swindled and still being honest and just, or whether it is a payday for all the wrongs we've done, there is a payday. And there is a justice to it, although it may not be according to our little world and the way we see it. But it goes back to the fact that I love that whenever I got that insight, that's, you know, that if we don't value honesty, we have a tendency to stretch the truth.
Mm-hmm.
We don't go with the light side, we have a tendency to go to the dark side. And being aware of that, it's kind of like that, well, it shows up in our health. It shows up in our relationships. It shows up in everything.
Yeah. You know, but I think with human nature too, we naturally get defensive when somebody is brutally honest to tell us something that goes against what we believe. And so that's one reason why people tend to not be honest and sugarcoat things. And I don't know what price you pay for that, because it's difficult to, I mean, you need to look at the relationship. How important is that relationship to me? And so I need to be careful how I say things. I mean, the other person, yes, needs to understand that the other person is really trying to help them. If it's a good relationship that they have to you, the other person really is trying to help them, but you can't help that feeling of anger or disappointment or frustration when you hear that truth. But it doesn't mean that the relationship has to be ruined. It depends on how you discuss it. And you need to be honest back to that person, telling, ooh, what you just said stung a little bit. And so give me some examples. Help me understand, and let's talk this through and work something out. So you do have to be aware of who you're talking to and what the effect is going to be of what you're saying.
The thing of it is also often whenever someone does spout something out like that, you know, then you ask for an example, they can't give one.
Right.
And so so it's also, in a situation like that, give a little time and a little space and get back together. Right. And talk about it. You know, so you think of some examples, and I'm going to be aware for some examples myself, so that I can begin to look and see how much validity is there,
mm-hmm.
and to value the very fact that you were honest enough to point that out.
Yeah.
To be. And I was thinking about valuing honesty and how we don't value honesty, we may be stretching the truth. But you see, sometimes we give excuses, which is really not being honest.
Right. Yes, exactly.
That in giving that excuse, not only are we harming the relationship, but we're harming ourselves, because we have this limitless ability to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
But our creative system has no filters. It has no filters. That's why the creative system can really generate some fantastic things as well as some horrible things, because there is no filter on our creative system. And as we become limitless in our creative system that the facts that we have is limited because we don't know where someone else is coming from. We don't know what they're thinking.
So we make it
don't
up.
know their intention. So as all of our facts is so limited, we set up these problems.
Yeah. No, I like you bringing up the thing about excuses, because that's lying too, because you'll make an excuse. I was thinking a couple of years ago, my aunt had offered her apartment to me for traveling. You know, I was going to be traveling in the area, and my daughter was going to be there. And then I said, well, can she stay at this apartment? And my aunt was given all kinds of excuses why, oh, she's a young girl, it's not a real good area, da 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 da. But then finally she said, okay. But then a few days later, her daughter called me and said, Mom really doesn't want your daughter to stay at the apartment. I said, why didn't she just say that? You know, she's coming up with all these excuses.
Right. Don't want to hurt your feelings.
Okay, it's fine. We're gonna make it work. And I said, she could. But that's not their culture to say no, she can't do it. It's to come up with excuses as to why you wouldn't want to, and so that's another way of looking at it, that we're not honest, because we don't feel comfortable saying, no, I really don't want your daughter staying at the apartment. If you're going to be there, that's fine. But I don't.
You can, but she can't.
I mean,
yeah, and then you get
and I get it. I understand. I understood that, and I said, no, I appreciate your calling me and telling me. I really didn't want to damage our relationship, and she had offered it, and so I thought it was good, but it wasn't.
Right. Had a worker doing some work recently, and I mentioned something else was helping me in the yard, and I mentioned something else that I wanted done, and I have a rock bed out there that I wanted kind of cleaned out and put some additional rocks in there, the little ground cover rocks, and all this kind of stuff. And so anyway, the guy came over here, just showed up.
Yeah.
And he said, I got some rocks. And I said,
Oh,
wow. I got a good deal on them. And anyway, so first I had to talk about the fact that he's overstepping boundaries and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And then I said, but okay, what kind of rocks you got? And he said, I got a real good deal on them. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I don't know anything about this person. So I'm thinking, well, where did he get those rocks and all this kind of stuff? This whole truckload of rocks, And so I said, well, I need you to know that I work for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And he went, ooh. I couldn't read anything because we're always reading people, And anyway, I said, well, let me see those rocks. And so we talked about it, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to let you put those rocks out there, go clean out the others. But I said that to say this. I got to thinking about that, not only because not just, but because it's my intention. I always want to be as upfront as possible. So, I told the guy, or I've got to tell the guy. Actually, I haven't told him yet.
Oh, recent.
I have retired from, but I still have connections to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. But it's just being open and honest, and I talked to my husband about it, and he says, well, I think he's he said he may not get his story straight, but I think he's pretty honest. And there's just something about that. I felt a comfort in that, that because sometimes one person can read another person maybe a little bit better than you would, being suspicious of or whatever.
Yeah.
And the fact that my husband had talked with the guy just in passing and got enough of a sense that he's trying to make a living as best he can.
Right. He's just trying to be helpful.
Right. And trying to be helpful. And he knew it was something I wanted, and he found a deal. And
And he jumped
Yeah.
on it, and
And then it goes back to my suspiciousness, of always thinking, because of having worked with prisoners for so long and how conning and conniving they can be, but not judging it, being open to the fact that there's always margin for error in the way I'm receiving, in the way I'm giving,
So I guess we're running out of time here, but I just thought I'd bring this up to get people thinking about honesty and how you value it in your life, and what kinds of things are you doing that maybe aren't quite honest. And if you do value honesty, maybe you'll try to change what you do to get people to be more open with you, and you do the same. So thanks, Mona, for everything, and thanks to our guests. And if, like she said at the beginning, if you have a topic you'd like for us to cover, please feel free to let us know. We'll be more than happy to talk about it sometime in the future. So until next week, have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.